I'm Imei, President of AIA Hong Kong this year. We had some expo members here earlier, but at the same time, we have our other committee chairs, Eric, Cynthia, Shannon, earlier Johnny, so Sujata also on our HNA committee, so welcome our expo committee. And thank you SOS and JEB Group for supporting this event, and thank you all the speakers, panelists for joining. And Vikki is our Committee of the Environment Chair, so it's our new initiative on sustainability. So we hope that this will be a good kick-off for the chapter, as well as for our code committee, and that we're going to have a lot of events coming. This year we actually have a lot of events planned, so exciting things latest upcoming building tours. We would have SI. We have St. Stephen's College on March 25th, SI on March 31st. These are both confirmed. SI is going to open soon, so it's a very exciting one. Also one of the most exciting green buildings projects in Hong Kong. We also have 2 Taikoo Place, which is also in the process of organizing. And as well as we have some big programs coming up also this year. So just some heads up in April, we are going to have our long-awaited GBA tour. So it's going to be a 2-day, 1-night tour, and it was supposed to be last year, but it got postponed to this year. So hopefully this will be a big step to engage our community to the new region. And also in May, we are going to join the Build for Asia conference. So we're going to organize a half-day symposium within the conference program, and it will be on May 12th. And that, as well as, of course, we have our HNA, which Sujata is leading it. So this year we are going to have an HNA launch event. So we hope to invite the past winner and also to make a more celebration. And we are looking into a new format for HNA. And that our annual awards will still be at the Rotunda, and our annual dinner, like what we have done last year. So we welcome you to kind of pay attention to what's going to happen. We are going to also have, as we have planned, the Southeast Asia Initiative. So we are going to have an event actually collaborating with Singapore, AIA Singapore, and also Singapore Institute of Architects. So we are going to collaborate on this event and organize something to kind of bring our members to the new region for opportunities. And we are also going to have other events like from our YG team on emerging and new practice, also on Greater Bay Area and Singapore, Southeast Asia topics. With Korea, we're also talking. So there are a lot of this that hopefully all of you would already, our members would continue to come to our events, and for other community members, hopefully you'll join us as well. So thank you very much again to Pam, to Jen, and I'll pass the microphone to Vikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel, for the introduction, and welcome everyone for coming to AIA on a Friday night. So I'll pass to all of you. So I'm Vikki Lew, chair of the Committee of the Environment. As Abel just mentioned, we are a new committee. So besides myself, I would like to also introduce the members of our group. We have Cynthia Ting, our co-chair of COPE. And we actually have more than one Cynthia Pan. And Jackie Luke, who is not here tonight, she will join us later. So tonight,
you need to hold the mic closer to your
okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, tonight we are very honored to have 4 wonderful panelists walking the walk on sustainability, who will share with us their insights and experience on circular economy. We have Pamela Hinton, General Manager of SOS, Paul Johnson from Bluestone Management, and John Abel from DFI Retail, and Howard Ling from Hong Kong Council of Social Services on the NGO side. So we have 4 panelists from very different disciplines. So maybe I'll kick off my first question. So tell us about your journey on sustainability. So what are the benefits so far in terms of going down the path of sustainability for your business? Maybe we'll start with Pam.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Think about this as a really sexy jazz club. So if you want to come and sit down and get close to the action, please come and feel free to sit close. So in terms of sustainability, for me personally, I have been an interior designer for 20 odd years. So sustainability has kind of been embedded in what I do, and we've been, it's been a part of my design process and part of the industry that I've been in for a long time. But I really got into this in a big way when Rob came to me about 2 years ago. And I think everyone on this panel has been exposed to it to some degree, where we're part of an industry that supplies product and supplies services and has been part of Hong Kong's success for a long time. And part of that success comes with this issue of waste. And so Rob came to me about 2 years ago with this idea that governments and industry are grappling with this enormous waste problem, and no one was really tackling it in a systematic, process-driven way. So we decided to do something about it and try and create a system and create a process that could deal with this in a data-driven, systematic way. So I initially came on board on a fairly casual way, and then got involved more and more. And the more I got involved, the more I realised it was, first of all, desperately needed. Everyone in our industry is grappling with this problem, and we need a solution. So I was quite keen to get on board and help. And it is a really, really interesting industry to be a part of. It's constantly changing. There's lots of different ways that we can tackle it. And I think the way SOS approaches it is very much solution-based. We're not kind of wallowing in the misery of carbon and landfill and all of the sort of dire situations that we find ourselves in. We're very solution-focused and trying to tackle the issues. So we're not afraid of facing problems, and that's part of the reason why we've got this panel tonight. We want to face the challenges head-on and hear from our clients and hear from the industry about what the challenges are that we're facing and how we can help create solutions to that. So what we're trying to do at SOS is understand from the industry and from all of our contacts what the challenges are that we're all facing and come up with solutions. And so for SOS, what we're doing is constantly pivoting and creating a business that will respond to those solutions, will respond to those problems.
Thank you, Pam. A really great point about the solution. So how about Paul from the project management side of it?
Yeah, so we're working in project management, construction management, and quantity surveying in an array of different sectors. And these include anything from heritage, which is obviously recyclable and great projects, but also data centres as well. So large-scale greenfield, brownfield type projects, and everything is kind of energy efficient, much more energy efficient now, and is designed to be much more energy efficient. And in our corporate office environments and our corporate office projects as well, again, the clients are looking at different sustainability methods, different ways, different options. But also, I guess the biggest challenge with that is on all of the different types of projects is the sustainability needs, sustainability requirements, the cost ratio, the cost, the carbon footprint as well. So everything is kind of measured at the moment, and because it is measured, it becomes much more of a challenge. But our guys are a lot younger than I am, but they do come from a different background with a different environment. Where they want to be part of the sustainability world, and us as a client, we're attracting those people as well. So it's only helping us for staff retention. It's helping us for staff development. Just recently, I've undertaken a number of appraisals with the key staff, and they're looking at leads, they're looking at green, they're looking at wellness, and they're wanting that as part of their CV, but not just as part of their CV, but also to learn more and to give back more. So that's helping them.
Thank you so much, Paul. So John, you are dealing with facilities that are at scale and also very energy intensive. Can you tell us more about it?
So, you agree with this? Hi everyone, my name is John Abel. I work for the Dairy Farm Group, rebranded as DFI. We look after Welcome Supermarkets, Marketplace, 7-Eleven, Mannings, etc., etc. And as you say, very energy intensive and kind of a big target for NGOs, big target for sustainability professionals, really. My personal kind of sustainability journey, going back to your original question, what does sustainability mean? I came from a marine biology background. I did a master's in environmental science. I accidentally fell into, well, when I came back to Hong Kong, I wanted to save the world. I think a lot of people that came out of university are passionate about what they've learned. You soon realise that actually 25 years ago in Hong Kong, there wasn't much in the works in terms of sustainability. I ended up in ERM, an environmental consultancy firm. Worked my way through kind of environmental consultancy, doing EIAs for government and things like that. Accidentally got into clothing business, ended up getting into sustainable clothing business, and then kind of came through property, retail, and now eventually worked my way into facilities management. Now, all the way through, the passion has always been sustainability. So somewhere along the way, you have to shoehorn your way into a sustainability type role. Now, in the clothing company that I was in, they didn't really have an eco angle. When I left, they were the biggest eco-sustainable supplier, hopefully globally, from a personalisation perspective. I ended up in a big organisation called Ling, who produce a fair bit of clothing and do a bit of sourcing, and worked with the sustainability team there. But I think in the last 20 years, sustainability as a subject has grown so much. It's gone from being kind of activists, tree huggers, to more finance people, ESG reporting, a lot more metrics that people are tracking. And from a sustainability perspective nowadays, working in a large retail organisation, sustainability means a totally different thing to what it did 10, 15 years ago. People have got targets. People understand what baselining is. People understand what they're chasing. They're actually looking for a goal. It's not just about doing the right thing. It's not about not using a plastic straw or not using a plastic bag. It's now about taking that tonnage down to that tonnage across a certain time frame. And when you're starting to measure that level, there's a lot more interest. We can start quantifying things a lot more. We can start understanding how much meaning we have in the good that we're trying to do. So it's not just about trying to do the right thing. It's actually being able to measure it and being able to benchmark against others who are also in the same industry. The industry now is so focused on specific metrics that you can see how well you're doing against competition. I think 10 years ago you probably wouldn't have been able to say that, not in a standardized way. So yeah, sustainability has become a real key focus, and particularly for DFI, the sustainability agenda really wasn't huge 3 or 4 years ago, and in the last couple of years it's accelerated very, very quickly to the top of the agenda. So it's a good place to be.
Thank you so much, John. You just mentioned, so how have you come on the NGO side of sustainability? So for you, it's not just environmental sustainability, it's also social sustainability.
Yeah.
How do you measure it?
My name is Howard Ling, and I've been serving Hong Kong Council of Social Service for 15 years, starting with a social enterprise initiative to connect the business world with the NGO world. And I'm also teaching at Baptist University, and I also serve on the board of a primary school and secondary school in Hong Kong. So when JEB and SOS came to me about this idea, then the word sustainability came naturally because of the education to both, I even did the environmental program for the kindergarten in Kowloon Tong, and that is called Soccer Kindergarten. starting from the movement called agri-food, which is about how not to save the food that supermarkets sometimes they throw away. How we can make use of that. Expired goods like Green Price Supermarket, another social enterprise to make good use of expired goods. And he's my mentee, and then we bring up the idea of how to make a supermarket to sell the expired goods. And this is the social enterprise drive to ensure sustainability is part of the business, not just like a bolt-on strategy in that sense. And for my sustainability for the academic and NGO sector, I think the first project that SOS did with Subban Foundation, that is an excellent example. So immediately I told Rob, there will be more schools waiting in line, but I don't want the NGO and the school to take it like a free donations, furnitures. They really need to treat it as also part of their budget, because they do have budget to renovate and to upgrade their furniture and places all the time. And they have to put that into part of their strategy rather than people donating something to you and you save that as a budget to spend on something else. Of course, that's the good part of it. But I want to educate them about how to plan in the first place to look around for SOS solutions before going into just the saving part. Supposedly this should be starting from the beginning to do it first time right rather than you're fixing it at the end. So that's the term of sustainability that comes to my education and NGO sector experience.
So thank you so much, Howard. So starting from changing mindset, and kindergarten is not too young to learn about sustainability. So my next question is, are you guys seeing any of the emerging trends in sustainability in terms of your business? So maybe Pam.
I think it is changing very quickly, but as John was saying before, I think data is becoming very, very important. And what we realized very quickly as a business is not just the project management services that we provide in terms of managing a process, but digital allows us to do things that we couldn't have done 10, 20, 30 years ago. So being able to capture many, many data points and create baselines and share that information allows companies to make much better decisions. So we're seeing a lot of trends in the digital landscape and capturing information and then using that information. So we're developing software to be able to capture that. So I would say data is really key. I think understanding carbon footprint is really key, but I'm seeing a lot of very, very different approaches to sustainability, and I think that's what's really interesting about the space that this is in. Everyone is on a different path. Everyone is tackling this at a different sort of time frame. We're not all doing this all together. So we've got companies who are developing plastic alternatives, we've got food waste, we've got furniture. There's lots and lots of different avenues that we can tackle this. But I think we're starting to see a general kind of shift towards the take, make, waste, linear approach into making things that are made to be made again. So furniture, we're seeing, Steelcase, other companies are coming out with furniture that is fully recyclable and made with recycled materials. And I think that is a trend we're going to see massively shift in furniture, where furniture is not just brand new, raw materials made into something, but furniture that is made to be made again and constantly shifts, and we're not using screws and glue and stuff anymore. It can be pulled apart, deconstructed, made into something else.
But that's certainly very wonderful to look at all the products and services from a whole life cycle perspective. So how about Paul? Are you seeing any of the trends about clients or end users?
Yeah, I just recently read an article about a project that was undertaken in Oslo, where aside from the furniture, this is 80% of recyclable goods and materials and raw materials reused in this particular project. So this includes things like rebar, steel, concrete, tiles, fixtures, fittings, etc. Now, there is a trend, and I certainly hope that this continues, there is a trend within the banking world and the banking sector for this to continue. But for new build type projects, these sort of strategies and initiatives need to be implemented and need to be designed to be implemented. And that's where it starts. It starts with the designer. The designer has to implement these particular strategies from day one. To answer your question about technology, our QSs, our quantity surveyors, utilise a software by the name of Costex. And that basically takes a drawing and then does an analysis of the drawing, does a takeoff, does a cost, etc. Now there's a tool associated with this where you just literally press a button and it says this is the global carbon footprint. This is how much it's going to cost in terms of carbon emissions. That hasn't been implemented yet. It hasn't been used, and that's generally because the clients are not wanting to pay for it. But it needs to be drawn into each and every project from day one, and it needs to be the designers that say you have to do this. It's necessary.
Thank you, Paul. I must repeat, designers, you must do this. And then John, so okay, in the retail industry, it is actually very challenging for sustainability given the very tight profit margin in retail. So how do you do sustainability?
I think, so looking at sustainability, and you talked about new trends, Dairy Farm, or DFI, we are across 12 countries in Southeast Asia. And I think what we are starting to do, and it's not a new trend, but what we are learning about now in Hong Kong, and we consider ourselves to be a fairly developed country, it's embarrassing how bad we are at sustainability. And I think the things that a very small handful of people were passionate about 10 years ago is really coming to the forefront of what is required nowadays, either from a corporate perspective, whether it be through reporting, or whether it be through statutory requirement. It could be, something as simple as a municipal waste charging scheme that's coming up, right? Huge impacts on large corporates like ourselves, who have lots of waste. Good for someone like SOS, who is trying to reduce, we're trying to reduce waste for the right reasons. But the fact that, and you say trend, it's not really a trend, this is people are starting to learn a little bit about sustainability in Hong Kong, finally, which is great. We're a little bit behind. We will very quickly catch up, because we will have to catch up. And I think that's probably one of the best trends that I can see at the moment, is that it is becoming a lot more top of mind. It is very high on people's agendas. It's, I'm not even in our sustainability team as such, but I'd say a third of the meetings that I'm in are related to something sustainability focused at the moment. Now, we are ahead of, say, somewhere like Vietnam or Cambodia, but it is in the agenda, and it is being discussed, and it is being reported, and we're having to baseline it now. So in terms of trend, what we're having to do in Hong Kong with regards to our reporting and our baselining is far more advanced now than it was even 2 years ago. So we're baselining against 2021. That's our baseline year, and for an international retailer like ourselves, that's it's great, but compared to someone like a European retailer, like a Tesco or a Sainsbury's or the market leaders in what was at the forefront of sustainability and what was driven predominantly around plastics and waste, packaging, there's so much more to it nowadays that actually we have had an opportunity to learn from what they didn't do and actually leapfrog that and create a baseline that's far more comprehensive now for an Asian retailer. We have the opportunity to catch up really quickly in a short space of time. And we've been able to learn from the mistakes that have been made through either technology or what worked and didn't work. And that's kind of the story for Hong Kong as well. Hong Kong, from a statutory perspective, has been very much on the back foot. I wouldn't say we've been deliberately watching others do things, but we have had the opportunity to benefit from what's worked overseas. So trend-wise, I think sustainability in general in Hong Kong, as a kind of buzzword. It's embarrassing to say that it's a buzzword now. We're about 20 years late. But that to me is the best trend that I'm seeing in sustainability.
So thank you, John. And good point on plastic. And we have to bring you back at another event to just talk about plastic in Hong Kong. So how about Howard? How is it like in the social enterprise?
Yeah, I think in the non-profit, and because in Hong Kong, lots of the education bodies are governed by the non-profit sectors anyway. So non-profit education sectors somehow blended together. But I more like the observation, maybe is part of the trend as well, is that sustainability is being part of the curriculum, no matter you are studying business or finance or accounting management. So across different disciplines, they share the sustainability within maybe a 13 weeks courses, that at least a week of the course is covering this topic. And how they interpret sustainability from the finance point of view, from the accounting point of view, from the marketing point of view. So they are trying to create that awareness. And for the primary school, secondary school, even kindergarten, that is somehow, I saw it as part of the learning formed within the curriculum, that they inspire them to visit different examples in Hong Kong. So that's why SOS becomes quite a good example for them in order to learn as well, because they can see the furniture. And one of the interesting curriculum that they emphasize a lot is called STEM. Now they put an A in it, they call STEAM, right? So supposedly that stands for Arts and Humanities. And the questions that we always ask the schools to see a furniture that is being donated is how, in the good old days they will see, oh, how this will be fitted into my room, right? But now you treat that as a piece of art and how this can be used as an educational material. And I think this is the latest trend that I see in many of the schools that I work with.
Well, that's really wonderful. That's a very positive sign that I just brought up. So like circular economy is very different from the linear economic model that we are used to. So in your work in sustainability, what are the major barriers or resistance that you have seen so far, and how do you deal with it? So anyone?
I guess that's
Oh, simply, there isn't one. That's really not an easy question to answer. I literally have no answer to that. It's a question that's so broad that you just cannot apply an answer to it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, my answer will be too long. That's why I want to ask you guys.
Yeah.
John?
If you were to break it down in terms of the circular economy and what we can actually do, from a retailer perspective, we are passing on goods, essentially. But what can we do within? And really, SOS has provided us with an opportunity to start using a circular economy ideal within some of the things that we do. We are starting to look at reuse, far more reuse of equipment within stores. So when we're refitting stores, we're taking it out. We're lined up for a conversation actually with SOS about some of our retail fixtures to take it outside just to the office solutions and maybe start thinking about what can we do in the retail sense. So how would you reuse shelving? The biggest barrier, I would say, is probably budgets. It's budgets. It doesn't, at some point in sustainability, it's going to cost you to do the right thing. And until we can quantify how much that cost of carbon is when you're on a decarbonisation journey, it's going to be very hard to justify a business case once it starts costing more. For the first few years when you're in sustainability or in decarbonisation, you're minimising waste, you're minimising cost, really. And then after the first few years, after you start getting the quick ROI stuff, it starts to cost you more to do the right thing. So using SOS is a cost. It's not a saving for us. And at some point we would have to, the barrier for me is justifying that expense to a finance team and saying, look, this is the right thing to do, this is what we're trying to achieve by doing this. And they say, well, what's the return on it? And I said, well, here's the carbon that I'm going to save. And they said, what's the carbon worth? And at the moment, I don't have an answer to that. So how much is it going to cost us to decarbonise the business down to net zero 2050? or to 50% in 2030? That's the biggest question at the moment for me. And I've approached Jardines with this. I've kind of thrown it out there that this is going to be a barrier because the return on investment just isn't there anymore after the first few projects. Well, maybe a few more than a few, but you're just not going to be able to see the financial return anymore. So for me, that's what the blockage in circular economy is.
It's really interesting because it's already very challenging in the business world. So what would it be in the non-profit sector?
Well, I think that the circular economy in my work space, I think recently is because of the competition, lots of the business competitions that I've attended. For example, like the Science Park or Social Enterprise Competition. The word circular economy was being mentioned many, many times. And I'm happy to see some of the champions having this idea, bringing this concept into the science park or with technology, such as the recent champion from UST with the Bria that works with Maxims, using the leftover bread, turning that into a real beer with the domestic, the local brewery. And so that's one example. And then you have mud jeans from Holland, and then you have the local test in Hong Kong. So these are the examples that I see more and more nowadays happening, especially in the maybe my students or the young people sector. They're trying to catch that buzzword plus making this into practice and put that into the business competition. And hopefully they won the prize and to make it happen. It's the beginning of the entrepreneurship, but I can see that this factor becomes more and more important. And of course, from a panel judging point of view, that would definitely be a bonus to give them extra credit.
That's really awesome. So I have a question specifically for Pam. So tonight we are here at SOS. So obviously, a successful business model on circular economy. So what are the major barriers that you face? And for instance, have people been very resistant to the idea of second-hand reuse furniture? How do you deal with it?
Yes, I would say from our perspective, we have probably faced, kind of building on what John was saying, we've probably faced two barriers. I would say the first is supply chain and value chain. So a circular economy requires a massive revamp of the entire supply chain. It's not just a waste management solution, but it's looking at how furniture and fit-outs are designed and produced. I think in terms of stats, and the 1.5 degree target that we're all sort of talking about and getting towards, 45% of the targets required to get to that 1.5 degrees requires a shift in how we make and use things. So how we make and use things comes down to design. And I think what we've discovered as a business is there needs to be a huge shift in how furniture is designed, how it's procured, how it's installed, how it's managed and maintained, and then the waste management sort of solution. And what we've found is trying to build a business that offers a kind of take-back program, for want of a better word. It's building up that supply chain of recyclers and repurposers and resellers. So people currently now in Hong Kong cannot recycle MDF. You can't recycle textiles. You can't recycle foam. Even chairs that the chairs we're sitting on, once you pull that apart, there's very little really that can be recycled. So it's revamping that whole supply chain and trying to find people who can build businesses to pull stuff apart and recycle it. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in China. We're speaking to people who are looking at recycling gypsum board panels, eco bricks. Many companies are starting to find solutions to that, but I would say a major barrier is that full value chain and revamping that. The second thing I would say is perception. And I think a lot of people, we're all dealing with people like this every day who, unless it's right on your front door and it's affecting you right now, it's kind of a, next time, it doesn't affect me right now. So it's this shift to a long-term perspective, and a circular economy is really based on a long-term view. So it might not affect you right now today, but think about your children. Think about your children's children, and a circular economy is very much a long-term view. So investing in doing the right thing today is going to impact the future. And so we need to shift from a perception of, projects, success KPIs, even bonuses, the way we structure businesses, the way we structure our incentivizing schemes needs to shift. We need to stop thinking about things from a short-term perspective and whether it affects me today, to thinking about long-term goals and evaluating projects, evaluating our buildings, evaluating our fit-outs on a more long-term goal. So I would say that's a barrier right now.
That's right. John, what's the
Can I just ask Vikki a question?
Pamela, sorry. Can I just ask you a question? So, obviously the last 3 years you've seen SOS start, right? Kick off, develop a little bit. All the while the border's been partly closed to China. It's reopened again in the last couple of months. What does that mean for SOS? What does that mean for kind of recyclability of where we have shortfall in Hong Kong? How's that helped? Have you seen any?
I think, logistics obviously is coming down. The cost of logistics is coming down. We can now truck stuff over instead of shipping things. But it's more policy based. I think China still has that policy of not taking waste. Many countries we're dealing with have policies against, so customs laws prevent reused furniture, recycled furniture, second-hand furniture from being imported. So it's not so much just China opening up, but it's also their policies around reuse and around waste. Even though China is technically Hong Kong is part of China, let's say it's a waste, it's a policy government issue. So we need to shift that.
I disagree with what you said. Sorry. But I think the perception of reuse of furniture is it's growing in trend. Using an example, if your button falls off a shirt, you go out and buy a new one. You don't take it to someone to get fixed. If your toaster breaks, you go and buy a new toaster. There isn't that necessary fixing area within Hong Kong to go and fix your shirt or go and fix your toaster. But with SOS, there is. Right, so you take the table, you refurbish it, you change it from a table to a chair, and a chair to a table, etc. I also disagree with what you said about recycling of clothing. Now, there is a government initiative at the moment, and it's called Hong Kong Rita, and we're in discussions with Hong Kong Rita for a new project in Chung Kwan O, and they're working with H&M, and they're taking old clothing and turning it back to yarn, and then developing into new products. And then it's bespoke projects. Bespoke products. So a bespoke shirt, t-shirt, jumper, etc. So I think the trend of recycling and repurposing of materials, I think it's growing. And I honestly believe that everyone around us is obviously responsible for that, but everyone's responsible for promoting it as well. So, yeah.
I disagree.
He's had 3 of it too.
So I think it's great. I think the first time I met Cosmo was on a group called Drink Without Waste, and Drink Without Waste is obviously it is an amalgamation of NGOs, retailers, government bodies, all sorts, trying to push and decide whether or not it should be a government-led thing on recycling PET or not. Now, there was a... I don't think he needs another one. He's already starting fights. So, I think with regards to recycling in Hong Kong, what actually happens with recycling in Hong Kong, the initiatives that are in place around recycling yarn, recycling things, you said it there, they're bespoke projects. That's not commercially viable, right? Everyone knows that you're not going to be able to solve Hong Kong's problems through bespoke projects. So when you do, it's fun having a little recycling park that the government have helped to fund. but it's not helping the overall issue about how many plastic bottles are going into landfill every day. And a reverse vending machine here and there is not going to help Hong Kong solve its recycling problems. So these kind of initiatives are great. They are raising awareness, but they're overall not really helping the bigger picture, the bigger solution. That although they are raising awareness, it feels a bit sad to me that there isn't a bigger solution. And I think, to Pamela's point, you need to have government backing and government support on things like the ability to import or export a second-hand chair. And if that's not going to be allowed, there are big issues around what you can do within an economy like Hong Kong, because the infrastructure just isn't here to be able to do that type of low-margin business on recycling, because land is too expensive. So you can't have a recycling plant in Hong Kong, so you're going to have to open up ports to China. So it's nice, and it's a fun project, but it's not going to solve the problem. It's interesting that H&M are involved, because H&M are probably the biggest contributor, right? It's like Swire being involved in a bottling plant, right? They're the biggest contributors, so that's coming from me, I'm supermarkets.
How about Howard? Do you agree or not agree?
Actually, I disagree and I agree. Why I said that? Because I somehow, agree with what Pam said about that borders between Hong Kong and China, because I had one experience with one of my restaurants in Hong Kong U, called Beaches, doing vegetarian stuff, and I got the abandoned chairs from secondary schools, and I think I got like 200 of them, and I wanted to send those to China to fix the sitting pad, because that was very worn out and broken, the rest were fine, So when I sent it to China, the China said, this is waste, I don't need that. And I said, no. I said, I'm asking that company in China to help me to refurbish it, and I'm going to bring it back. He said, no, this is waste. So what I ended up doing is that I have to ask my contractor to use a minivan to ship, 5 chairs, 8 chairs per day, like per trip. Yeah, for smuggling. They, on a daily basis for 4 days, and my contractor finally, before he did that, smuggling thing, he handed me a card saying that, Howard, you should call this card. And they supplied school chairs, brand new, for $280, and I'm charging you $320 for the refurbishment. So you are paying $40 extra, and I had to, be illegal, to help you to do this. I said, I insist doing this with $320 rather than $280 because I don't want to own them, because I said, I'm running this restaurant, I don't know for how long, and then I'm creating extra waste. So I somehow let him to feel that I'm just borrowing them for the temporary use of a restaurant. I don't know how long my restaurant lasts, so please do this. So he ended up doing this for me illegally. but that's kind of, I disagree and I agree.
The idea, have a business to recycle plastic, that's your client. So maybe next I'll open the floor for questions. Anyone want to ask the first question here?
Well, because the last conversation was about shipping things in and out before, and I'd like to ask the fact that when we don't want to create waste, but then when we're shipping things to other places, then we are also creating carbon footprint. So how did that work out in the map or in the strategy? Because I think a similar problem with other suppliers that we have talked to is we can, as designer, we can specify sustainable materials that's probably coming from Europe. Very nice, not European high standard. But we will have to ship them all the way from Europe to Hong Kong for the project. So what's your viewpoint of
I'll start this off. I think for me personally, I think that's what I find really exciting about the circular economy. And when we're talking about economic growth and decoupling economic growth from environmental impact, I think over the last couple of years with COVID, that showed us how fragile our supply chains are. And we realised just how interconnected and fragile these supply chains are. So I think with the circular economy, what we're trying to encourage is local remaking, local redistribution, local recycling. So if we can, going back to my point before, if we can build up those value chains and those vendors who can do this, ultimately we don't want to be shipping to Europe to then recycle or ship to China. It's not sustainable at all. For SOS, we're trying to minimise what we do send to China. But again, it's very interconnected. We need the government to create incentives and policies to encourage private capital. But private capital is absolutely necessary. So we need that flow of money. We need to generate an industry around this. It's not something we can do as a non-profit. SOS is not a non-profit. We need to create an industry around this. People need to be making money to make this viable. But I think that's where opportunity lies. And I think there's so much of this industry that can be built up to create local solutions rather than shipping stuff around. Because, as you say, it's not sustainable to be moving things around endlessly.
I mean, carbon footprint is obviously a key factor, but it's also the locality and also where the material is. What's the need for that particular material? Where does it generate? What's the purpose of that material? And how do you assess how it gets from point A to point B? And I guess as project managers, we plan for this, we program it, we look at what's the cost effective, what's the energy efficiency, we look at the cost ratio from point A to point B, and it's very much, I guess, a sustainability effort from the inception of the project all the way through to the completion. And again, it's something that needs to be instilled from day one. It needs to be instilled from the designer. It needs to be instilled from the client. It needs to be instilled from the landlord. But it's everyone's responsibility, and that's where it's key. It needs to be built into the specifications. It needs to be built into the guidelines, and it's not only the project manager's perception or in trying to install it within a project. It's the architect, it's the interior designer, it's the sustainability engineer that works alongside the architect or the interior designer. It's everyone within that project team that's responsible.
So I've got I had an experience last year with our designers, in-house designers, and our in-house designers had tried their best to use recycled materials, to then be told by somebody within our sustainability department, do you have the certifications? Do you have everything there and the transparency, and do you know where it came from? And they got ripped apart. After that meeting, one of the designers walked past me in the pantry and as I was getting a drink, she just said, if you want to tear any of my other ideas down, then feel free. So it made me realise, and I've seen this in a number of cases in Hong Kong, where you can't let good get in the way of great. Right? You've got to understand that when people are trying to do the right thing, there isn't necessarily. It's not me though. Who is it? So I don't think when people's intentions are good, right? We are in an environment where metrics matter, accountability and being able to measure absolutely every kind of kilogram of carbon that we're saving is one thing. But in an environment and a society like Hong Kong, where we really are taking baby steps at the moment in sustainability, I don't think there's any harm in trying to get the right message out there first. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best in class. It does have to be with the right intention, I think. And this is my personal view, not necessarily DFI's view, by the way. But it is if it's done with the right intention, and you're not trying to advertise the PR angle on it, but you are trying to educate, and you're trying to get the message across that this was done with the right intention. It was done to try and use recycled materials. It was done to try and reduce a carbon footprint. Then yes, there's always going to be naysayers on, and there is, you know, in the plastic bag argument, right? A single-use plastic bag versus a recycled bag. There's a lot of studies that show you have to use that recycled bag over 1,000 times before it has less of a carbon footprint than the single-use one, right? So there's always going to be somebody that will shout you down. And I think from a design perspective, I think if you are getting the message out there that you're trying to do the right thing, I don't see that as a bad thing. Somebody in my ESG reporting team would probably say different, but I don't think in particularly in Hong Kong, and Pam, you're talking about Hong Kong as kind of a closed economy with regards to solving the problems that we have unique problems in Hong Kong. And landfills are filling up, and we do have an issue today. That sounds a bit activistic, but we do have an issue today. And trying to design well with the minimum impact is something that I think you can do in a multitude of ways. Whether or not you used a lot of, you know, carbon getting it here by sea freight, or there's always going to be something that you did wrong. But I don't think that should get in the way of a designer's good intention.
I guess there will be some formal solutions that we hopefully can get the government to have some policy change, or hopefully to enable these cross-border things happening in the coming future. But I guess there are also part of that, I call that as informal solutions. As you remember, I have one experience in Kowloon City, you know, like a back alley, that in order for the people to survive, you know, in that area, you know, you have to be very thrifty and you have to be very resourceful. So that, you know, you see the plastic basket, maybe hopefully there will be another place for plastic basket. That they will, but there will be too many. So they have one on the end of the street, and then the one on this and another side of the street. That I see people just taking one and take things, you know, put in there and then put it back, and then so you see like an area of sharing economy, that they start to share things, you know, so nothing was wasted. And then when they see a string on the floor, and they just jam it on the rusty pipe, so that from a legal point of view, this is not a littering because it's not on the floor yet. So they just put it back on the, you know, a pipe on the wall, so that another people can grab it and use it and to tie it on the garbage bag. I guess this is the kind of, we call it as an informal solutions, and sometimes the non-profit sector will have lots of this to offer, and then we just need to do the matching, you know. Somehow SOS can be the first phase to start this discussion. And ever since, you know, we work with SOS, our sector is inspired as well, because many things are measurable now, so that they can take it up to the management and tell them that, you know, this is not donation anymore. You know, this is something that we can do for the environment, you know, and education as well.
So anyone else? Cynthia.
Thank you for all the great sharing. I mean, I agree with a lot of good insights. My question is I feel like sustainability is definitely not one single person or like one single party can do it. Many times when you talk to people, to your finance team, to your users, and can you share us any magic word? Like, you know, how would you convince them? Like I heard, like sometimes you are saying, look beyond now, or like don't look at your KPI, or like do something good. But as we all experience this kind of discouragement, or like, you know, feeling, oh, maybe, the client make the decision, oh, okay, the finance department make the choice. Any way or like solutions or like steps or like that can share with us, so that we will, like, I think it's a way that we can move forward, like that, to help people to understand or perceive better to make choices. Because I think in order for them to make informed choices is important. Like, yeah.
I think from the project management perspective, our project managers are working with a large number of interior designers and architects, etc. And what we're seeing in the current trend, I guess, is that there is a sustainability environmental engineer that's part of that project team. And they are working with the clients. Now, there's the larger corporations, the larger banking institutes, and the larger lawyer type firms. They have a sustainability requirement, and they have an environmental requirement, but it is being enforced. So we're seeing it as something that's becoming much more apparent in all of our projects, more particularly in the office environment, as well as obviously the heritage environment, but also in the data center environment or otherwise other types of projects, where they're looking at things as what's the lifespan of that particular item, and how can that particular item be enhanced. So, for example, a generator or a chiller has a lifespan of 15 years. They're looking at a lifespan of now 25, 30 years. So again, it's what's the performance of that particular item and how long is it going to last? And they're looking at the long term, so it's all about the capex and the opex of the costs relating to the particular project as well.
I think the best advice I would give is know your audience and speak their language. Right. So I think I finished a sustainability course a couple of years ago, and at the end of the course there was a load of sound bites and videos from people who are across a massive span of industries, and there was one sound bite that stood out, and it said, oh, you know, you've just done a 6-week course, you're feeling really passionate about sustainability and how you can speak to your CEO and your C-suite about, you know, what you should be doing. The last thing you should say is sustainability. Don't use the word. Don't use the word sustainability, because depending on who you're speaking to, it can have all sorts of, you know, connotations. But when I speak to a store manager in Welcome, I'm going to tell him about waste, and I'm going to talk to him in terms of profit, because that store manager wants to know how can that affect my P&L in my store. When I talk to our ESG guys, I talk in carbon. So I'm talking about the same project or the same initiative, but my savings are going to be in dollars for the store manager, they're going to be in carbon for the ESG guy, they're going to be in kilowatt hours to my sustainability team. Depending on who you're speaking to, you really need to know your audience. So if I'm talking to the CEO about it, I'm going to talk to him in US dollars, and I'm going to talk to him about how much I've saved for the year. Oh, and how much capex did I spend, and what was the ROI? That's the way I would talk about sustainability initiatives, and that's thinking bigger. And I think there's no harm in people just trying to get the bank of desks around you to not get the polystyrene font out at lunchtime. Go in with a plastic box. Take it down and get your chalciophane in a plastic box. Don't get it in a polystyrene. You know, take that reusable box to get your breakfast in the morning. Take an empty one from home. And it can start there. It can start as small as that. But understanding if you're talking to your peers or if you're talking to your CEO is really key to getting buy-in. And if you don't get the buy-in from your peers or from those above you or below you, you won't get any traction in what we would call the broader sustainability sense. And it could be a recycling program, it could be a waste management program, it could be an office fit out, it could be just getting our finance guys to use SOS and put that in the budget. But I do have to, you do have to be careful what you say and how you say it, and you can't be an activist. That's what I would say, is you cannot be an activist in a corporate environment. It doesn't work. People shut their ears, they stick their fingers in their ears and they don't listen to you, because they won't take you seriously. If you talk in dollars, talk in carbon, talk in the language that they understand, you will get by.
That's a good question and very good answer. That's only my comment. Like all this.
I like how.
Not me. I think also to add, we're doing a fairly large university in Taiwan at the moment for an Australian university, and they're moving from Kowloon City across to Taiwan. But they're looking at the whole reuse of the furniture, which we're working with SOS with. But also they're looking at the long-term strategy of their IT equipment. They're looking at can we transfer the cables across? Can we transfer the copper element? Can we transfer the raw materials? And again, we're kind of working with the design team, mechanical, the electrical, the architects, etc., to kind of phase how we can do this and how we can limit those particular materials and how we can reuse them. So again, there is a foresight, there is a way, there is a method, and it's to bring everyone onto track. It's to bring everyone together to make sure that this particular element happens.
Okay, one last question.
I want to thank JEB and SOS for starting it. It's a big thing, better now than not having it. But I wanted to ask you about consumption. We are in a society where we consume a lot. I mean, if you compare to US, probably Hong Kong consumes less and stuff like that. But if we don't bring this equation of consumption into the thing, consuming less and living with less, I don't think we'll solve the problem of the environment. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think recycling on its own is not going to do enough. So we need to stop thinking about this as being a recycling issue. We need to completely redesign how we consume and how we use. I would say generally we need to stop thinking of ourselves as consumers and start thinking of ourselves as users. And we're seeing major shifts in this. We're seeing Airbnb and Uber and this whole shift towards a sharing economy. We're seeing the library of things, I think in London. So there's an entire library of tools and things that you can use. So if you need a drill on a Saturday, you just go there and you use it for an hour and then you return it. So I think that is some exciting shifts that we're starting to see in the industry, where you're not taking items, buying them, using them for an hour, and then they are wasted. Same with furniture. So I would say the shift towards being users of things, sharers of things, sharing of resources, making them again, that's going to be the key to making this successful.
I think it's a really good point. And mindset starts with kindergarten programs, and it starts with parents, and it starts with explaining to people that things aren't disposable, right? We've gone through a whole generation of plastics and toys that are used once and thrown away, and where are the wooden toys gone that you used to use and stuff? I'm just joking. And it is a mindset. It's an understanding that and you can get this across to your peers and to your kids and to your aunties and uncles who have come through this very I'll just buy a new one type attitude. And I am the guy that fixes my toaster, and I don't throw away those things, and I do try and fix stuff. But I think that's mindset. And you can be the first person. You can be the seed. And I've had a lot of people over the years just say, why do you bother? Why do you bother not using the straw? Or why do you bother saying no to the plastic bag? And when you do some simple maths calculations across, if I can get just this panel to stop doing that, and then they can get 5 people, and then we can convince this room, it very quickly becomes a very big number. Yeah. So it is about mindset, and it's about understanding that you have an opportunity to be able to do that. Hong Kong's not the best place to be able to do that. But equally, when you are in other societies, and I've been in the States and in the UK and in Australia, where they've got a lot of recycling, you can sometimes switch off. The mindset can go from, okay, because I put it in the right bin, refusing it wasn't the first option, right? The first, your 4 R's, refuse is the first thing you should be doing, right? You don't need to get that disposable thing, whatever it was. And just that whole concept of, I don't need that extra one, or, I could fix that thing, is something that as a generation, we have to try and improve on. That sounds really kind of
doom and gloom, but it is very much a mindset thing. Hong Kong is not a great place for that. And I can say this, I'm half Chinese myself, right? Chinese society likes new things, right? We like to buy new things. And me just trying to convince my mum not to use a second-hand thing would be a victory for me. So yeah, it is a mindset shift, and it's not easy to do. There's no easy answer to it.
I think the first thing, yes, I did play with wooden toys. But equally, we first met tonight, and I said, John, my wife says hello. And my wife is a principal of a kindergarten in Sai Kung. And this is a forest school where it's instilled at very, very young age, ages of 1 to 2, of the necessity to recycle, the purpose of the environment, the purpose of the forest, the purpose of sustainability, etc. And I have 2 daughters, both of which are 19, and the youngest one is turning 18 in a few weeks. But they came home at the ages of when your children are now at Clearwater Bay. They came home and said, we don't want to use plastic. We want to use metal straws. We're using the metal straws for this particular purpose. So I guess the younger generation are instilling it into me. They're instilling it into John's generation, which isn't that far off me. But I mean, it's there. It's being encouraged. It is being encouraged at school, but it does need to be enhanced, and that to me is the message.
Yeah, I guess it's not just the education side. For my example, in the kindergarten, because marketplace is just next to it. So after I did the agri-food, one day I was so surprised that when I walk in to the supermarket, which is like a place again, so I saw the orange dropping on the floor. And then that kid from the kindergarten picked up the orange and put that into her mom's basket. And then her mom is looking at him and saying, what are you doing? And then the kid is pointing to me, he said, I teach him to put it in the basket because you are the one who knows this orange just dropping on the floor and you eat it today, don't eat it tomorrow, right? And then who is he? He said, and then he's the king of fruit. I said, no, I'm just a volunteer teacher. I'm just teaching your kid, this is what agri-food is all about, right? So if you know this is something dropping on the floor, put it in a basket and eat it that day so that you become the ambassador of agri-food. So congratulations, your son just got passed. He said, oh yeah, oh, okay, I know. And then she's happily putting this to the cashier, and let's say 1 orange, right? Yeah, so that reminds me also, every time now I shop and I bring my wife to Marketplace or that Oxford Road, because this is a part of educational experience. But I'm sure that lots of parents, sometimes, they will ask the children, what are you doing? Put it back, or don't put it in my basket, So that's the beginning, but it's very, very important because it happens every day when you walk into a supermarket, lots of things dropping on the floor. What are you going to do with it? So I end up asking my kid, put it on my basket, put it on my basket. He said, are you crazy? I said, so you put it on my basket and we have to eat it tonight. There's nothing wrong. Delicious. So, part of the story about my kindergarten and marketplace. Yeah. You can ask the shop manager. She knows me very well.
Thank you so much.